It's Hexy. Let's do a little chit chat here about this upcoming game called Khalkin Gol. You already saw me look at the both sides of the map, and I chose to play on the more artsy side. Either side's fine. Terrain probably a little easier to define on the other side, but much prettier on this side. I mean, you can tell this is rough or hilly or whatever, and wetlands, and there's a river, and the clear looks like, from a distance, it looks like a bunch of grain or wheat fields. But it's all right. Villages, a couple villages on the map. All right, so we're 4 turns into this thing, and um, I have not played Freezing Inferno because I didn't have the game until like maybe I think a day or two or before I got the demo here for Khalkin Gol, or maybe a week at the most. I don't know. But so I don't know how the gameplay goes, so I had to learn. We're working off I guess a still in the works rule book. So we had to print off those of us that have it, had print off PDF version. There's still things that are going to be filled in, but the game works off an action sequence. Okay, it's only 8 turns long, as you can see by looking over here at the side of the board here. You've got 8 turns, 8 phases, whatever you might want to call them. And the green ones are where reinforcements or unit replenishment comes in, and that's where you spend your points to either build new units or replenish units that are on the board or air stuff, whatever you may use those points for. The basic operations phase of the game is units can move, attack, and or regroup, or they can do that. It's pretty simple. Your combat is done. Your attack values are done by the unit there on top. He has got an attack strength of 2, and he's got a defense strength, which you're never going to see because of 3. All right, and then you add to that number the number of units that are in the stack. So he's got, counting himself, he's got 5. So his attack strength would be a 2 plus 5, so it'd be a 7. 2 plus 5 would be a 7. If he was defending, it would be a 3 plus 5. Depending on how many number of units are in the stack. All right, and then you go to your combat table against the enemy. Like, say you may have 9 points against 8 points, and then whether there's a terrain modifier or not, you roll an 8-sided dice, and you might get a minus or a plus, and then you apply the result. Pretty simple. All right. Now, you've got these headquarters units. Like you can see that one right there says 4, and he's an infantry. All right, but that's a Japanese general, not necessarily a headquarters unit, although they are there for your supply too. But whenever that stack of units attacks, he goes over here, since he's got that headquarters on there, and you find the infantry general for the Japanese, if they're attacking, and the worst roll he can have is a 2. Now you have multiple versions of these, multiple generals, multiple officers, and you can pick up to, I think it's 9 points. I did mine by random draw. So you can pick up, so like, say you pick one of each. You're going to pick an artillery, a tank, and an infantry. The total dice roll number on their cards between all 3 of them can only add up to 9. So, so the Japanese have their artillery leader. The minimum dice roll for whatever stack he's with for artillery is a 4. So if you roll a 1, it's still a 4. And the tank is a 3, and the infantry is a 2. And for the Soviet player, the Russian player, you can see theirs over there. Sorry, the light's a little messed up. But you can see theirs up top there. Their tank is a 3. Their infantry is a 2. And their artillery is a 3. That infantry commander doesn't have a name. They probably just couldn't find one. All right. So artillery can fire from range, a range of 4 hexes. Okay. Now, the artillery rules aren't clear in this PDF yet. So what I don't know is most time when you play a game when artillery shoots at range, if there can be no effect on the artillery. That's not clarified in this rules. Maybe I need to look at Freezing Inferno to see how that one was handled, or maybe it'll be in the final version of the rules here for this game here. So, and of course, if you have that artillery leader on that stack like we do here, let me put that down. All right. So this artillery right here, this leader for the Russians, artillery is a 3, so the worst roll he can have is a 3. So if he rolls a 1 or a 2, it's still going to be a 3. And that's how that works. And it helps on the combat results table, okay? because you roll 0 or 1s or 2s, and you can get a headache. It can give you a headache. All right, units can also suffer what's called a non-T or non-T or something, whatever. If they suffer this result, you put a marker on them, and it's the defender. And then their next turn, they cannot attack, they can't enter an enemy zone of control, and their movement is reduced to, I think it's half, okay? So, and believe me, right now you're not looking at, I got to remove one somewhere, up here. I had a lot of them. There's about 8 of them on the table there a minute ago. And then at the end of the phase, just take them off after that turn where they are not allowed to attack. All right, so I was reading somewhere about why didn't the Japanese attack. And I don't, well, okay, I'm not sure how they could have. I don't think their numbers matched the Russian buildup. And as you can see here, the Russian, now nobody has taken an objective yet, which you can see the numbered hexes on the map. But the Russians are pushing over here, and they're loaded. Turn 3, I did some replenishments to units, and and I actually dwindled this. These are the casualties. I don't think I have it about 3 or 4 casualties or after I did the replenishment. But now you can see it's increasing again already. But I built a new armor unit for the Russians with their last points, which when you build a unit, so you have a table that tells you how much they cost at the bottom of the screen there. Okay, sorry for the light. All right, so I decided with the tanks, I built 4 units. I think I had 35 points left. So I built 4 tanks. That was 8 times 4 is 32. Then for building a new unit, you got to charge an extra 2. So we built 4 tank units, but you don't put them on there until after their phase is over, and then you drop them on one of their checkpoints. So I decided to put him down here because I got such a good thing going on down here for the Russians. They're already across the Khalkin Gol River, and they're pushing towards that first checkpoint. The Japanese, they're a few points less than the Russians are. So all I was able to do was replenish, and while they're not looking so good down here, up in the north, I'm assuming that is the north, they're doing a pretty good job. Matter of fact, they just put two marks on this tank unit here, one on this one, and this infantry unit, I think, took a couple too. So I got a feeling the next replenishment for the Russians may have to go in that direction up there. And like I say, when you do replenishment, so there's a phase during the turn where you count the number of political points on the political point chart, which is right here. And every operations phase, there's a phase where they get that many, we'll say dollars, okay? They're cash. So at the start of the game, the Russians are at 26 and the Japanese are at 24. So I think the first 2 turns, nothing changed, and the Russians ended up with a total of 52 because you can't spend the money until you hit one of those green phases on the turn record track over there, as you can see, okay? And then at the start of each phase, you have these event, or I guess you'd call them event cards, but they have like 3 or 4 for each game turn or each phase. So phase 3, you draw that card right there, and then you instantly apply what it says at the bottom. And they got a little story there to tell you, about what this is all about. And then you apply that. So the Russians lost 4, and I did these random draw too, 1 for each phase. So the Russians lost 4 political points there. All right. So that dwindled their chart down. Other ways you can dwindle the chart is during air superiority. I'll try to give you a light explanation of air superiority because I think they're still working on the rules to it. And I know that VUCA sent us some emails explaining the basics or the premise of it. But you do an air superiority phase where you total up your air base strength, which would be the number up here, whichever one you're on, and then how many fighters you have. And then the enemy player does the same thing, and whoever has a higher number gets air superiority, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then whoever has air superiority, he has options he can use where he can either apply a +1 to only 1 ground attack, all right, during that phase, which I think they could bump that one up a little bit more. It's a small battlefield, but I think you could give them a little bit more on that for air superiority. Maybe divide it by the number of fighters they got or something like that or whatever. But then you can bomb supply lines, which is going to cost, if you bomb, it's going to cost the loss of political points, all right, which is very important. Or you can bomb the air base, which will dwindle down, which we've done this once. which will dwindle down the amount of fighters or bombers. So this thing here, this marker's on strength 5. He can have 25 aircraft. Each side started with 14 fighters and 12 bombers. But now they can only have 25 total aircraft. Well, they've got, what do they got here? 10 and 12. They've got 22. And the Russians can only have a total of 30. And they are sitting at, no, they're at 22. And the Japanese are sitting at 17. All right. And then you got anti-aircraft guns. And on the first turn, you start with 3. And you have an extra one. And you have an extra fighter and an extra bomber. I'm not sure what that extra counter is for, to be honest with you. Maybe it's just because it was a double counter sheet. You got 2 counter sheets, so you ended up with an extra one on each one. And you can only have, there's only 3 anti-aircraft, and there's no ability to rebuild anti-aircraft. Well, on turn 1, all 3 anti-aircraft guns are sitting on the air bases, right? Well, didn't go after the air bases because they can subtract from the attack if you attack their bomb their air base. And then after that, the player can decide where he wants to put them, either on the air base or to defend the supply lines. And then you'll roll against that and lose fighters or bombers or whatever before they get a chance to bomb their targets. Haven't really had an effect yet on that one. So, and then you got your combat results table sitting down here, which is pretty. Like I say, it's pretty simple. The results there's like 3 or 4 different results, as far as numbers or elimination or stuff like that, or retreat. Got a weather chart that you roll for at the start of each phase. And like I said, there's only 8 phases. Simple thing right there. Tells you what the effect is, okay? And then you have this thing called espionage and deception. I'm using it. Haven't got to a point, and I'm afraid I'm already on game turn 4, but you got to spend political points to raise these up. And what they do is they allow either you can withdraw before battle. One attack, the defender can withdraw the unit before battle. All right. Once it's used, you go back to start and start all over again. All right. Espionage, where you can use that if you can force the player to re-roll theirs or their opponent's die if they're not satisfied with the result, and then it goes back to start. So, I don't know. I think I like this idea, and I'm looking at the rule book where it looks like there's some stuff that's not printed out yet or added in the rules yet. So I'll wait and see. Maybe there'll be more to this. This isn't enough, and I think it's too costly. Well, then again, I guess if you want to do that, it's probably going to cost to do that. So maybe I'm missing the whole point. All right. That's about all I can say about this right now. I'm probably going to finish out the game. Doesn't really take long to play. But like I say, I'm into the 4th turn, and there's not much going on for the Russians up there. All right. You don't have like charge in and overrun in this game. Okay. You move and they attack. Artillery can fire from range, and then they can move. I think there's limitations on it. But all the combat units, you have cavalry, infantry, and tanks. They can move, and then they do an attack. I don't remember seeing anything about an overrun in here. So while I say the Japanese are stalling them up there, and the Russians are pushing hard down here. Now maybe once, because these armor units have like 18 movement points. The cavalry has 20. The infantry has 14. And it costs 2 or 3 or 4 to move through this stuff. And right now it's raining, so it costs 4. Or it costs an extra one in certain terrain. But if the Soviets dwindle this down, or destroy it or whatever, then maybe they can break out and run. The problem is you got to stay in supply. And your units have to be within 6 hexes of a headquarters. Okay? And then it's unlimited for the headquarters back over to a checkpoint or supply source, whatever it is. But these rivers, unless there's a ford, you can't just go across a river with your supply. I almost boo-booed up there with the Japanese. So you have to keep that in mind while you're blowing out. So now down here, the Russians do have, I think they have 2 headquarters units down here. Yeah, so they do have 2 down here where their major offensive's going on. They got 1 up top. The Japanese have 2 up top and 1 down here, but this is such a tight bunch. Now, I don't know what's going to happen here if they get pushed out, whether they're going to backtrack this way or backtrack to the north. So, not the kind of game I usually play. The money thing throws me for a loop. I feel like I'm playing Monopoly when it comes to looking at that. That's because I've never played one with money, but I guess it's just like burning, the replacement points like you would have at OCS or something like that. They just gave you a nice little chit that looks like dollar bills, and you spend them. So yeah, that's cool. At least there's a method for you to track it. So I guess that has its plus sides to it. And then the little player aids they have, only two companies, VUCA and these guys here, Princeps Games. Come on, the nice cardboard finish, thick little cardboard, nice little layouts on them. All your charts are on these things. Yeah, you can't knock it. This is just another one of those companies. I put these guys, Lock and Load, VUCA Sim, in the same category as the components of their games. And then a nice big old box, and you gotta love these storage boxes they put in there with the little flip lids. Because once you get, you still gotta put your counters and baggies, but once you get them in there and stuck in those trays and your rule booklets down in there and everything, because they make the rules fit that big box at the bottom. Like I said, this didn't come with any, just the cards. And then you put everything in there with the maps back on top of it. It closes and everything sits in there nicely. All right, so there you go. There's my first look at Khalkin Gol. Future release coming out from Princeps Games. And it's not something like say you'd see me sitting on the table all the time. But at first, the other night, I thought this was going to be a disaster for me. But now that I've pushed through 4 turns, it's not too shabby. I can't wait to see what the final product will look like. But so there you go. Let's get this up so you can see what my first evaluation of this game is. And we'll talk to y'all soon.